take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy?
I'm a human being, god damn it! My life has value! It's time to ask yourself what you believe.
Mass murder, torture, perjury, embezzlement, fraud, deception, treason. These are just a few of your many crimes against humanity. You will not win this war, for you are fighting the very essence of humanity.
Hey, welcome to Truth or Talk. I'm April Bowden.
And I'm Virstyne Henry.
You can visit our website at truthertalk.com and visit us on Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff. Follow us. We really appreciate it. So, hey, Virstyne.
Hey, April.
Happy mid-morning. It's mid-morning where we are right now.
Yeah, and it's afternoon.
Or is it afternoon?
For me, it's afternoon, right? And for you, it's mid-morning.
In Texas.
Well, I'm in Texas, and she's in California. California, A.
California, yes. So, yeah, so today we're going to do a show about this thing that's going on with all these dead doctors popping up. There's been, I think, 9 now. There was 8 yesterday, and today I just pulled up my Facebook, and there's another.
Oh, well, yeah, because last I heard it was 8.
Yeah, there's a 9th. Well, he's a dentist. He went by the name of Doc, and he was a holistic dentist, and he had some group going on to help the underprivileged fund their treatments, and, you know, if they couldn't get insurance coverage, because when you're a holistic, it's really hard to get insurance coverage for stuff like that if you want to go that route. Yeah. But anyway, so he was working on that, and he was 41. He was really healthy, so there was no reason. It was a shock to his family. So anyway, so there's 9 doctors now. And we're going to focus today on one of them, the first one, which is Dr. Jeff Bradstreet. And he was the first one that had a suspicious death. He was a doctor, a DAN doctor, a Defeat Autism Now doctor. Mm-hmm. And he's been around for a while. He actually had 2 autistic sons and himself. And on June 19th, he was found a gunshot wound to the chest that they said was self-inflicted, and he was found in a river.
Who just shoots himself in the chest? Come on, man.
It's a very awkward thing. Even if you try to just stick your finger to your chest in that position, it just seems bizarre. I would think it would go to the head or the mouth if you're going to shoot yourself
in the mouth or the head.
Right, anywhere like that, but in the chest. But anyway, he was found with gunshot wound in the chest and in a river. When he first passed, what was going around on Facebook was that he had a heart attack. And so I think a lot of people were kind of like, oh, well, wow, that's sudden, because just 2 weeks earlier, he had been at the Autism One conference where he gave the lecture that we're going to play in the next segment. We're going to play the lecture that it's just a little under an hour long that he gave called How Close Are We to an Autism Cure? We're going to play that in the next segment. But just about 2, maybe 3 weeks before his death, he was at the end of May, was at the Autism One conference giving this lecture. And so it was just really sudden and surprising to everybody. Everybody saw him. He looked fine. Then all of a sudden he's dead, and we were told it was a heart attack. Then it came out that the local newspaper had written that he had been found with a gunshot wound, and that it was an apparent suicide. The local sheriffs were calling it a suicide. But that's weird because shooting yourself in the chest is bizarre. Also,
in the river,
throwing yourself in a river. You're just going to be standing by a river.
You'd be like, I'm going to shoot myself in the chest and by the river. Like what?
Right, exactly. But this is odd. You know,
who does that?
Right. It just doesn't sound like it passes the test there. So I don't think anyone's really buying it right now. And the family has set up a GoFundMe account to investigate this guy who's on there, who is claiming to be his brother. Has set up a GoFundMe account to try and raise funds to investigate to do a private investigation of his death.
So his family doesn't even buy it. Great.
No, not at all. And if you look at the thing, it's actually really sad. One of the first comments was from his ex-wife, who was his first wife, and they said, you know, she most people regarded her to kind of know him best of everybody, and she was kind of like, well, I don't know about that, but I do know that he would have never given up. I never, ever would have, he just in no way was the kind of person that committed suicide. I don't believe this at all. And that's his ex-wife saying that. So you can read for yourself. There's a lot of comments on there if you go to the GoFundMe account and find it. I think they've surpassed their goal because so many people in the community aren't buying this, that they're actually just funding them, donating money, and because we want to know what really happened. It doesn't seem right. It just doesn't seem logical. And if he did, and then the other thing too was that
his son just graduated from high school too.
Yeah, his son had just graduated from high school. His oldest son was autistic, and he was 21, I believe, and he had finally just graduated from high school and was going on to college. So he was able to achieve a certain level of recovery from his autism, his symptoms and stuff, because he was very severe as a child. Dr. Bradstreet talked about how his son used to smear feces on the wall. He was really severe, and he got better over the years. He wasn't completely recovered, but he was a lot better, to the point that he was able to graduate high school and go on to college. So, and he took a lot of pride. When you see the video, or you guys will be able to listen to it, you can see Dr. Bradstreet getting visibly choked up when he talked about his son, and how he, missed his graduation. There's two parts to this video. We're only going to be playing the first part, but in one of them, I remember he made comment that he had missed his son's graduation. He was visibly kind of upset about that, but it just didn't seem right. Plus, there were raids, the FDA and the Medical Health Association, one of those, had raided his office just the day before his alleged suicide. So just the day before, they went into his office and they confiscated everything. They took out all the computers, all of his medical records, and they were said to be looking for a treatment that he was giving to patients called GcMAF, and he had done some studies on it a couple of years ago in Italy with these other doctors in relation to its effects on autism, and he had been practicing it in his office, in his clinic, but and they said that was the reason that they went in, and they took everything. They took all his records and everything. So that's just really bizarre, because if it's just bizarre. And then he's gone the very next day. So I guess what they're wanting us to believe is that he was so upset about having been raided that he went and killed himself.
While standing by a river and shooting himself in the chest, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez was one of the, he
died?
Yeah, he's one of the doctors.
Oh my God, I totally know who he is. Sorry, you faded out for a minute. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh, I had no idea. Oh, Jesus. Oh my God.
Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez, the famous cancer doctor.
I know, but he was the one. He was using the enzyme therapy to help treat cancer. And Suzanne Summers, that played Chrissy's company, she was a huge advocate of his work because I think that's what she used to help cure herself from cancer.
Yeah, I think right after his death, she tweeted a picture of the two of them together. So he was a well-known cancer doctor.
Oh my God!
And they said that he was the 8th. I think he was the 8th doctor. So at first they were all kind of popping up in the same general area in the Florida area, and then Dr. Gonzalez is out of New York. So I don't know what that was all about, but he's dead now. So yeah,
I don't know. It just hits a little closer at home because I didn't know about Jeff Bradstreet until he died, but I knew about Nicholas Gonzalez. In fact, I put him on the list of people that I wanted to interview. Mm-hmm. Because I was in Robert Scott Bell. He was talking about, he was in the documentary that Ty Bollinger did for The Truth About Cancer.
I know.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's getting bizarre. So most of these doctors I hadn't heard of before, but I did know who Dr. Jeff Bradstreet was. I've known him about him for many, many years, because I actually saw him. It was one of the first conferences I ever went to in 2008. I went to the Defeat Autism Now Dan conference, and he was one of the speakers there. And I saw him again, I think, at least one other time, maybe more than that, because he's a frequent speaker at conferences. So I saw him in 2008, and at that time I remember thinking that he was quite, I guess for me at the time, because my son had just been diagnosed with autism, that I didn't really know that much about the medical side of it. I kind of just was new to the whole thing. And so for me, a lot of what he was saying was kind of bizarre. You know, I thought it was a little bit, it was just over my head, I guess, but at the time. But now I get it. And it was funny because I was cleaning my my bookshelf, and I found my paper, like the syllabus that they handed out at the conference. And I found the one that I had for that particular conference. I kept it all these years. So I was looking through it, and I was looking at his lecture and his presentation and everything, and I was starting to remember some of the things that he said. And one of the things that he said that struck me as really odd, and but I remembered it was that he said that autism could be connected to an infectious disease. And everybody in the audience kind of gasped. We all went like, "What? No way!" And he said, "Well, come on, infectious disease comes up. How else can you explain something that's on the rise so rapidly?" And he was quite aware of the vaccines being contaminated with things like SV40 and mycoplasma. He used to regularly treat his patients for stuff like that. And I had bookmarked on my computer before he died. I'd had a couple articles by him, and one of them was on some of the like dormant infections and viruses and things that are that kids with autism have. Some of them we know that the origin is from the vaccine, and others we're not exactly sure where they're coming from. But but certainly, mycoplasma has been found as a contaminant. Mycoplasma is a type of infection that's a walking pneumonia. It's a respiratory infection, and it's walking pneumonia. So you can have it and be walking around and feel ill, but not really sick enough to have acute symptoms where you're lying in bed. And then SV40, as we know, was the polio vaccine was contaminated with it. So Bradstreet was very aware of that. He knew that the vaccines were contaminated with these. I mean, vaccines, even without being contaminated, are bad enough to destroy your immune system. But once they're putting all this stuff in there covertly, and even, if they're doing it by accident or covertly, just because they're accidental and they're incompetent and they're not sterile environments like they claim to be, or that they're putting them in there directly because they want to experiment on us and they want to see what will happen if these things we don't exactly know, but I do know that SV40 and mycoplasma are both vaccine contaminants, and they've been found out, and I also know that they were biological weapons that the military has created, and I also know that Bradstreet was treating his patients for those diseases, so he knew what was going on. And his own son, we mentioned that he had a 20-year-old son who just graduated from high school who was autistic. His son was one of the children that was scoped at the Royal Clinic by Dr. Andrew Wakefield. So he was in on the Wakefield studies back in the early that were connecting the MMR vaccine to autism. So, and Bradstreet was also he spoke about on vaccines and autism to Congress, congressional hearings twice. He was also involved in many vaccine court cases, and including one that went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Wyeth or Sudillo versus Wyeth Pharmaceutical, and in a clear vaccine injury case. So, and that vaccine was contaminated, and they knew it was contaminated. That destroyed that girl's life and made her mentally retarded and physically disabled for the rest of her life. And they knew that it was contaminated, but because it was covered under the pharmaceutical company's immunity, they didn't have to have liability. So what they were suing for, they were taking it to the Supreme Court to basically say we should have the right to sue the pharmaceutical company because they made an error. It wasn't, they had contaminations in here and these ingredients were not listed. So, and they lost. They didn't get the right to sue the pharmaceutical company. But he was involved in that case. He was an expert witness on that case. And as well as many others.
You know, these people's families and patients and friends must be because they were people too. They had lives as well. They helped lots and lots and lots of people, more than any mainstream doctor has with the treatments that they've been conditioned to give. You know,
right.
What doctor can say that? What oncologist can say that he's actually cured his patients of cancer? What doctor can say that they cured people of autism that's, you know, went through the mainstream allopathic medical system? None of them.
Right.
You know,
none of them. Yeah.
Not a single one.
Not a single one. And that's where, you know, they said that Bradstreet was estimated to have recovered like 4,000 kids. And so that's a lot.
Yeah.
And the thing that I think that's going on around the alternative media, and you know, I wrote an article about this before the alternative media, before we knew the reason for the raid. I suspected that it had to do with this GcMFA because I had read that there had been international raids all over the country regarding this. It's called GcMFA. It's macrophage therapy. And it basically acts as like a sponge. It goes in and we have these naturally occurring in our body, and they kind of soak up things like bacteria and things like mycoplasma, like we were talking about at the beginning, which is a bacteria that causes pneumonia. So these will kind of act as little sponges, and they come up and they eat them. They're like enzymes, or they are. And anyway, so they had performed these studies in Italy. Dr. Bradstreet and this team from Italy had performed these studies on using this treatment for kids with autism. And so I noticed that, and they had a 15% complete recovery rate, so the kids, their autism subsided in 15% of them. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you consider the fact that not a single pharmaceutical drug can do that, can do 1%, can do 0.0%, can do one child out of 1,000. They can't do anything. So they're just saying, well, too bad, there's no cure, there's no recovery at all. But they were able to recover 15% of an uncurable disease, what they consider to be an uncurable disease. So, or a neurological disability, whatever you want to call it. But anyway, and then they said that others had marked improvement. It induced fever in the children, which in some cases that's actually beneficial. Fever therapy has been used to fight cancer and many other things because it causes the body to that's our body's response to having bacteria in them. So when you get injected with these things, they kind of just lay there dormant, wreaking havoc on you without expressing out, without, you know, it's the suppression of the disease that actually causes the problem, not the expression. The expression means that your body's doing its work. That's why you get a rash. That's why you get mucus. That's why you get fevers, because these are the things your body's trying to get this stuff out of you. So, and it shows that it's working. It shows that it's getting it out. So it was causing these expressions. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, well, I wanted to go on, and
okay.
I'll jump on.
And then you'll tag onto that. Okay, so yeah, so anyway, so he and his team in Italy had been performing these therapies on it. I picked up on that, and I didn't know yet at that time when I wrote the article why they had raided his office, but I thought that it had something to do with that because I had just seen how they had been raiding these offices all over the world who were doing this type of treatment on anybody with cancer or any other type of autoimmune disease. So I just kind of correlated that, and so I put in the article and talked about, you know, these things with the viruses and stuff, and how, and then possibly was Jeff Bradstreet onto some sort of treatments that would cause a cure or a recovery amongst children with autism, at least some of them, to the point that he was such a threat. Because if you think about the autism being I believe, actually I know, that is the most lucrative disease that has ever been created, because It incorporates every area of medicine. It also incorporates every area of education. It incorporates every area, every profession in the world is being changed and altered by autism. And when I knew that when I was writing the article, but what was funny was then I was actually researching to see if I could get some kind of like visual, a picture to go along with that statement, and then I actually found an article that cited how Google and who else was it? It was Google and Autism Speaks, the big corporate nonprofit that's just in it for the profit, had teamed up to create job fairs, and basically what they're doing is all of these big industries, bankers and financial investors and whatnot, are grouping together to try and see how they can make a buck on autism. Not even like pretending to not, that they're doing it for noble causes. Just basically saying, we're seeing this trend and we're going to make some money off of this. Like straight up. And I was like, whoa, it was just some like financial magazine. And you guys can go check it out on my article at aidensrecovery.wordpress.com. You can see my latest is on there. And it's because I don't remember the exactly where I found that citation, but it was I just knew that it was the most lucrative business in the world, the most lucrative disease in the world, and just from having personal experience dealing with it. And so when I started researching it, I found out that it was even worse than that. It was even worse than what I had suspected, because not only that, but that there were all these people that are getting their money, and they're not even like shy to say it, and they're hiring kids with autism who are on the high end of the functioning to do just basically like data entry and math statistics and all this stuff. It's like it's really out of hand. It's beyond the scope of what we can talk about here today, but it's a big deal. Well,
I was actually just going to tell you to tell the audience about your article, but you did. Your wonderful article. It's really great. It's a great assessment, and just you're so right. Because even when you were working on it, you were telling me about it. I was like, even more than cancer? You were like, yes, even more than cancer. And I was like, how? And you were talking about, and then you talked about the education aspect and jobs and everything, like you just mentioned, basically. And I was like, you're right.
It's much bigger than cancer, because what people may not realize is that people with autism are as sick as people with cancer.
Yeah.
So they're not, and they have a higher rate of cancer amongst people with autism. So I found that, I knew all of those things to be true, and that's what gave me the impetus to write the article. But as I was writing it and I was looking for citations to back what I already knew just from personal experience, it actually ended up being more so than I had even thought, because I actually didn't know. I knew that they had a higher rate of cancer. I didn't know, and I knew that they died earlier, but a lot of people were saying, well, some of the reasons that people with autism actually they have a shorter lifespan is because of accidents. They drown accidentally, or they do things like things like that. And I found that's not true at all. That's actually not the case. It's due to their compromised immune system, and they're more likely to have heart disease, diabetes, epilepsy, chronic gastrointestinal problems, autoimmune disease, osteoporosis, mitochondrial dysfunction, encephalopathy, which is a known vaccine injury. It means swelling of the brain. My son has encephalopathy. Neuroinflammation, neurotoxicity, the list goes on, and including cancer. So even oncology is an area of medicine that that people with autism are going to be using a lot of, because they have higher rates of that. And the mental illnesses, that are comorbid with it, Tourette's syndrome, other types of intellectual disabilities, sleep disorders, sensory processing, obsessive compulsive. And on and on and on. It doesn't. It never ends. So every area of medicine profits from it. So the biggest threat to the medical establishment is a cure for autism, because they haven't. They've created basically for their purposes, the most lucrative thing that they could possibly create, because it's going to affect everything. And then I didn't even realize, that all of these financial agents were getting involved in it. When I saw that, I was like, ugh, it made me want to puke, honestly. I wanted to, barf when I saw that how these guys were, all these biotech firms. It was like, oh, here, I just pulled it up on my page. Private equity and venture capital firms, TPG Biotech, Shore Capital Partners, Bay City Capital, Great Point Partners, and Google Ventures, plus hedge fund Scopia Capital Management are among the investors slated to attend the 2014 Autism Investment Conference next week in San Francisco. The event is organized by Autism Speaks in partnership with Google. Ugh, I hate them all. And so they're just looking to make a profit off of people with autism. So it's really sick and disgusting, and I I don't know what else much more to say about that. But we're going to take a short break, and in the next segment, we're going to play for you, like we said, the lecture given by Dr. Bradstreet, the late Dr. Bradstreet, at the Autism One conference at the end of May. I think it was May 22nd. And but we'll have all the links and everything. So if I mess anything up, you can verify it in the write-up. So anyway, so please stay with us. We'll be right back.
Everything I'm looking at seems crazy. The newspaper, the television, nothing's right. Nothing's telling me what's true. It's like I fell into a bucket of cream and kicked my legs until I became a mouse. What's that about? I'm a conspiracy realist, not a conspiracy theorist. I want a t-shirt that represents me. What? There's one that's available? Go to shop.truthertease.com, says the voice in my head. Shop.truthertease.com. It's not crazy. I'm not afraid to go on the internet and go to shop.truthertease.com. I'm not scared. I've taken out bowling balls that look like you. That's what I said. Straighten out. Get your conspiracy realist t-shirt. Don't make me come over there. You look good. You look good.
This is the Starbucks lecture. It should be sponsored by Starbucks, looking at the audience. I mean, really. God bless you all for getting out of bed this early. I don't know how this happened to me, to have to get out of bed 2 days in a row at 8 o'clock to give lectures. I usually have to get up about 6 to get ready by 8. But all right. So we're on time. I have 105 slides in 60 minutes. You ready? Take a big sip of that coffee, warm it up. Some of it's going to be just kind of like flashing, sort of like advertising hitting you, you know. Some of it's going to be intense. I am Jeff Bradstreet. James Jeffrey is what my mother called me when I was in trouble. You know how that goes. The middle name got converted to the first name because my dad was also a James. I don't know why they just didn't go Jeffrey James. That would have worked for me. That would have been okay. But anyway, that's who I am. My main office is in Atlanta. I'll get you a little bit acquainted with Atlanta. How many of you have been to Atlanta other than the airport? Not just the airport, but actually been to Atlanta. All right, it's a cool place. Great. So we're supposed to be giving this interesting lecture, which is entitled this: How close are we to an autism cure? Anybody interested in that in this room? So the word cure in medicine implies abolished, right? Gone with no risk of coming back. If I tell you you're cured of cancer, you're supposed to no longer worry about reoccurrences, right? As opposed to remission. And when we talk about remission, you're concerned about your next office visit and what it's going to tell you, right? If you're in remission. So the cure word is real in autism. There are some individuals that have already been cured. They don't have autism. They're not at risk for remission. They're on with their lives. They're in their 20s. They're doing great. They're home free. That exists. Now, it doesn't exist for every kid, and the purpose of this lecture is to talk about why. So here's the bottom line. It really depends on what you think you're treating. Are you treating autism? Good luck with that. And that's kind of a behavioral intervention because autism is defined behaviorally. But really, what you're treating, in my opinion, is this massive environmental immunological insult on your kids during critical times of development, some of which we can repair. In some cases, a lot of it we can repair and restore. But in other cases, we kind of hit these roadblocks. And some of you are sitting here really frustrated that you've done lots of good stuff. And please quiet those phones for me. God bless you. Lots of good stuff. And still, haven't seen the kind of results that some of the people that come up on the stage talk about. You're going to have some moms tell you that they did this or that, and their kid is all normal now, and it just frustrates there's another word I wanted to use there, the heck out of you, doesn't it? Doesn't it just kind of, isn't it tough to sit there? I mean, you're happy for that person who's all better and their kid's all better, but you still got your kid at home who isn't all better. Makes me want to cry, truly. So I'm very blessed to have a lot of great colleagues that I work with, and I don't want to take credit for being the genius that thought this all up, but I'm smart enough to collaborate with a lot of smart people, and with our collective intelligence, we can start to put together some good things. So Marco, Nicola, and Dario, I've published with, I've done research with, we're still collaborating, we're still designing new things, and this is my Italian cohort. Doug Johnson is a genius when it comes to laser treatment. We're not getting into laser today, we're going to talk about lasers tomorrow, so just to kind of give you a setup, today is kind of an introduction to the medical literature in terms of what you're actually treating. What are you really trying to treat? Tomorrow is, how do we get you better? There's a little bit of that this afternoon as well at my lecture at 5 o'clock. So Atlanta, big place, 9th largest metropolitan city. 80% of the state's population live within an hour of the city. So we have a lot of people to work with. And there's a lot of things for you to do. Georgia's beautiful, isn't it great? So those are my pictures, by the way. Stone Mountain, never been there. I've lived in Atlanta for 4 years, never gone once. I hear it's a really nice place. There's lots of fun things for kids to do. Moms that have been there like it. It's a good, fun thing. Lake Lanier, gorgeous, been there a bunch. Bill, my partner in HBOT, lives on Lake Lanier. He's got a boat, actually just loves to take kids with autism out on his boat and have fun with them. He's an amazing guy. We have all kinds of fun stuff. The world's largest aquarium, by 5-fold, it's 5 times bigger than the next biggest aquarium. How many of you have seen the Atlanta Aquarium? It is like awesome. Like incredible. I know you're you're kind of wondering why I'm doing all of this early in my talk, because you see all the people that are coming in. So I knew at 8 o'clock in the morning I'd need a few fluff slides to kind of get the people into the room. So we're working on that. God bless them, they're still coming in. Welcome to the Starbucks lecture. Glad you're here. They just built this cool eye thing where you can go around. It's kind of like the London Eye. They have one in Vegas as well. Busiest airport in the world, which is one of the main reasons that I relocated there, because I have a very international practice and I travel internationally a lot. So Atlanta is a great connector hub. It's easy for you guys to get there to see me. But I also work out of Newport Beach as well in California. Not a bad place. So first of all, if we're going to cure autism, so what is autism? So you got some ideas? It's a mess. It's a pain in the you-know-what. It's an experience that has matured me as a human being a lot. So it's been a amazing journey. It's been a great journey, getting to know the families and the children and seeing what they go through and how dedicated you are as parents. I never really was someone who grew up wanting to be a parent. That wasn't on my bucket list. So by the time I graduated from medical school, I wanted to be a test pilot in the Air Force. Did that. I wanted to travel the world. I've kind of done that because of autism. I probably wouldn't have traveled the world without autism. But then I became a parent of a kid with autism, and I'm going to tell you his story at the end. So let's see what it is. This is my favorite one, child behaving badly to make the parents crazy. Number 1. That's kind of the behavioral concept, okay? But that really doesn't help us very much. And they're not behaving badly because they want to make you crazy. They're behaving badly to adapt what it is that's going on with them. They're in pain. They can't control the dopamine in their head. They can't relax. They can't calm down. They got to do something with all of that. We'll talk about that some more this afternoon. Is it a gut microbiome disorder that affects the brain, or is it an inflammatory bowel disease that affects the brain? And where did the inflammatory bowel disease come from? Did it come from the microbiome? Did it come from some other toxin? Interesting questions. Is it an allergy of the brain? All of these things, by the way, are in the medical literature. I'll show you some of the stuff. Is it a central mast cell disorder? That's Professor Theoharides' work out of Tufts. Or is it an abnormal endocannabinoid signaling? This is the work that I'm getting behind and doing some research in that area, along with Dario and Nicola, as well as researchers at the Max Planck Institute in Germany. So we think that you can trace the roots of autism back to an endocannabinoid disruption/deficiency. And I'll explain what on earth that is. It's not because you didn't smoke marijuana in college. And it's not because you're not smoking marijuana now. It's a critical, natural occurring pathway in the body, very much like how we regulate insulin or how we regulate thyroid hormone. So is it an inflammatory change in microglia, which are immune cells that live in the brain, or is it an abnormal blood-brain barrier? It's all out there in the literature. Is it an infectious disease? Lyme disease. How many think Lyme disease is there? Okay. How many think it's measles? Well, measles is fading now. So HHV6, anybody got that one on their list? Okay. CMV, EBV, Epstein-Barr virus, the mononucleosis virus, HERVs, endogenous retroviruses and other weird bugs like that, mycoplasma, strep. Should have got a bunch of hands for strep. Now, did those cause it, or were they secondarily acquired because of a previous insult to the immune system that lowered the gates and allowed infectious diseases to come in? What do you think? Caused it, or the gates were down and stuff came in that shouldn't have come in and they couldn't deal with it? Notice the lack of answers at this part of the lecture. We'll get there. These are questions. This is the question time. So is it caused by parasites, or the other view is it's the absence of parasites? Both are in the literature. Is it caused by parasites? Or is it we don't have parasites, therefore we can't mature our immune system? You guys aren't into parasites, I can tell. So, but we're not done. There's more. So is it a form of vitamin D deficiency? I'm big on this one myself. This is a big one for me. Vitamin D deficiency at the right time of development can permanently alter the way the endocannabinoid system works. And the endocannabinoid system regulates just about everything. Is it a form of epilepsy? Or is epilepsy a consequence of whatever happened to insult the brain? Is it cerebral folate deficiency? There's lectures going on about that. And where did it come from? Why is there cerebral folate deficiency? Is it autoimmunity to cerebral folate receptors? And if so, why are you forming an immune reaction to folate receptors? What's going on with that? Where did it come from? Is it a brain autoimmune disease? There's lots of literature about autoimmunity to various brain structures in autism. Or is it the consequence of an insult to the brain that triggered an immune response, and now the immune system's trying to clean up what happened injury-wise to the brain? Did it happen in the womb or shortly thereafter? That's where most of the transcriptional studies that are looking at the DNA message are sending us back to very early in the development of these kids. Now, does that mean because it happened early, game, set, match, and it's done? No, there's plenty of kids who can recover from whatever that is. So is it a sulfation detoxification defect? You just can't get the sulfur groups around to detoxify and to run things and to manage your dopamine and to keep you clean from all those environmental insults. Is it a methylation deficit? There'll be lectures going on that. Is it tied into MTHFR? Anybody want to go for the MTHFR gene and blame that for autism? How about COMT? That's the wild and crazy gene. It's also the gene that makes you smart. So it's a gene that is there in the environment. It's kind of called a warrior gene, but it's also one of the genes that's associated with a higher IQ. So how do we take a gene that's associated with higher IQ and turn it into a vulnerability gene for autism? These are questions. Can you see what keeps me awake at night? Other than my wife's sleep disorder, but we'll talk about that later. So is it a form of unrecognized thyroid deficiency / disorder / autoimmunity to thyroid? How many of you are in the thyroid camp? Got a few of you there. Okay, good. You thought I was done? No, this goes on. This is the medical literature. This is what autism is. So is it a mitochondrial disorder? How many mito people here? All right. How did you get to be a mito person? How did you get to be mitochondrially wounded? Is it a mitochondrial gene? How many think the genes went bad from the mitochondria? How many think the environment screwed up the mitochondria and they need help? Okay, great. Is it oxidative stress? The lecture after this is talking about oxidative stress. Is it oxidative stress? If so, where did it come from? Why do we have oxidative stress? That's kind of like biological rust. Where's that coming from? Is it an altered gene? Do we have a genetic epidemic of autism? How many of you think autism is a genetic epidemic? No hands. See, now, I used to say that there's no way in the world you can have a genetic epidemic, and I want to retract that statement publicly. You can have a genetic epidemic. It's called genotoxicity, and poisons, which we're going to talk about in this, can actually poison the ova, the egg, before it forms a baby, or the sperm, the spermatozoa, can be poisoned in a way that disrupts the DNA that isn't transmitted to the DNA of the individual. So you, mom and dad, may be fine, but your offspring may be actually going through genetic mutations in the process of forming because of the environmental insult. So you can have not just a pure genetic epidemic, but a consequential genetic epidemic due to environmental toxins. And Stephanie's shaking her head, and thank you for agreeing with me. Stephanie Senef is here. So, is it an environmental toxic insult? Mercury, aluminum, glyphosate, pesticides, plastics, flame retardants, car exhaust, jet fuel stabilizer, every one of those is in the medical literature associated with causing autism. EMF, microwaves, cell phones, high tension wires. How many of you are in the EMF camp? So you got to have a few clean heart followers here, okay? Dietrich has been talking about this for a long time, and he's not wrong. It's in the medical literature. Is it alteration in the physics of the brain, the entropy of the brain? How many of you would like to give a lecture on entropy in the brain? Do we have any physicists here? So entropy is a really important concept. We're going to talk about that this afternoon with MRT because entropy really does run a lot of what's going on with the brain in autism. So high entropy is high randomness. Autism is a very random communication disorder within the confines of brain communication. It's a lot of inefficiency. It's too much heat for the brain to manage, and the brain adapts to that by slowing down its frequencies, which makes it less easy for people to use their brain. Alteration in the physics of the brain is a big deal, and we're going to get to that. So this is kind of what it looks like to me. So how many of you are on this road right now? Okay. This is my life. This is my highway. People walk into the office and they put this down in front of me. It's a stack of records this big and say, okay, so here's my highway. And somewhere along the line, we've missed a turn. Okay? Society, environmentally, regulators have missed a turn, and the turn that they missed has put our kids on the danger zone. We are in the danger zone. We have 1 in 10 children that can't develop normally. Autism may be 1 in 30 boys, but 1 in 10 children cannot develop normally. At least. That's the minimum. So what does PubMed say about autism? Let's take a little tour there. So this is, and you can do this. How many of you do PubMed when you can't sleep at night? Just start doing that. It's fun. So just type in, go to PubMed on your browser, just pick a word, okay, autism plus anything, and see what happens. It's kind of fun. I do this all the time. So let's do autism plus microbiome. We got 87 hits to go through. You can start scanning through the abstract, see what seems to be relevant. How about autism and microbiology? 284 hits there. That's kind of a big deal. So microbiology is going to overlap with the microbiome, but it also gets you into people talking about CMV causing autism, EBV, parvovirus, Lyme disease, all kinds of other things are going to show up in that one. How about gastrointestinal inflammation? Only 39 hits. You know why? Because it's really scary to examine the intestinal tract inflammatory disease in kids with autism because Dr. Wakefield's work has been discredited. Therefore, anybody who comes along after that is going to be thrown into the same camp where they will be tortured, abused, lose their license, publicly humiliated. Blogs will show up to talk about all the evils that they've accomplished. So in defense of Dr. Wakefield, and I've known Andy for 20 years, and my son was actually scoped at the Royal Free Hospital by that whole team before they were dismantled. His work has never been discredited. They objected to the way he got his IRB and timing sequences, but the work has never been discredited. The inflammatory bowel disease is there. How many of you think it's there in your kid? Yeah. Okay. It's not been discredited. It's been maligned. Discredited means there wasn't this truth in the first place, but it's been badmouthed to the point that no physician will deal with it and research it, except Art Kriegsman and a few other folks that are brave enough to keep doing it. God bless them. Mast cells and autism, we come up with 26 hits. Most of them have Theo Herides names attached to them. Mast cells are a big deal. They're in the brain, they're in the gut, they're major immune cells. They crosstalk with other immune cells like glial cells in the brain. They're a big issue. If they're fragile and if they're contributing to autism, what are we going to do about it? So how many of you think you yourself as a parent have mast cell fragility or hypersensitivity? How many of you think you're there? A lot of you are and you're not willing to admit it. I can prove it to you. How many of you are dermatographic? Like you rub yourself and you get a big red streak and wheal. Okay, that's mast cell hypersensitivity. How about endocannabinoid in autism? Only 17 hits on that. This is a new and emerging area, and it's got my attention because it seems to be one of the key regulatory pathways. Microglial in autism, these are those specialized immune cells that are supposed to be caretakers for neurons. They're there to defend neurons, to guide them, to usher them to their proper resting site, to act as stem cells for the immune system and for the neurons in the brain. Critical role, 75 of those. Not a lot of literature on that, but that's a fair amount. Genetics and autism, 4,734 articles on that. That's because what gets the most money? Genes. So right around the turn of the century, what did we do? We sequenced the human DNA, and we got really excited because we figured we had opened Pandora's box and we can get inside and we can figure it all out. And we had the keys to the civilization and the city. We could do it all because we had the sequence of the human DNA. So we've thrown a lot of money at genetic causes of autism. The reason for it is families who have twins tend to be at higher risk. There's asymmetrical twins, which are the non-identical twins, as well as the identical twins. There's studies out there that would imply that. But again, when you look at the strength of the associations genetically, it's pretty weak stuff, actually. Gene-environment interactions, this is where I fall in. So autism, in my opinion, is an environmental disease that interacts with genetic vulnerabilities to create issues. And there's 146 of those. Autism and pesticides, only 49 articles on that, but not bad. Environment and autism, we're getting better. There's 2,449 if you put that in. That's a lot of reading to do. That will keep you up for a few nights. Autism and Cure, 96 hits. Wow, somebody must have cured autism. I read every article. Everyone says this: there is no cure for autism. And usually followed by a but, or a however, or maybe we should go down this pathway of research. The reason the cure got in there was because it really should be no cure, okay? Because that's what medicine thinks about autism. It has no cure. So why am I giving a lecture about how close are we to a cure? Because that's what you want. That's what I want. Are we there? Are we getting there? So a lot of intersections. I don't know how many circles I drew there, but there's a lot of circles, and there's a lot of circles in the literature of things that are overlapping. But somehow, either we wind up with optimal brain function in the center of that, or we wind up with some developmental disorder, whether you call it autism or ADHD or LD or whatever you want to call it. We either wind up with that circle giving us optimal brain function or we don't. So we have a big issue. So I threw out a lot of chicken and eggs at you, okay, and I know some of you have skipped breakfast and are just having coffee at this point in time. But what is it the insult to the gene or the vulnerability of the gene? So these vulnerability genes that we know we have in autism have been around for how long? Probably a really long time, like thousands of years. Genetic drift in the human species is relatively subtle. It doesn't happen quickly. It doesn't happen generationally without some sort of huge environmental impact like radiation or pesticides or other sorts of things. So these are not bad genes. You're not giving your kids bad genes. They may actually be not even your genes after they go through environmental pollution. They may alter and change. So, recovery from the diagnosis of autism and then. So this is an excellent study from Karolinska, and there's some great researchers at Karolinska, and I've been following the work of Gilbert, and I'm going to go through some of his work with you today because I think it's a really exciting addition to our thinking about autism. Excuse me. So they followed a bunch of kids who recovered. They used the word recovery instead of cure, but by everybody's criteria, they had no symptoms of autism. They were mainstreamed. They went through intensive ABA and biological treatment. They had no symptoms of autism. They followed them sequentially for years, and guess what happened to them? They stopped therapy. They probably went off the diet. Everybody thought they were out of the woods. Nearly all of them regressed back into autism. So, at least in this situation, the way they were approaching them at Karolinska, they were causing a remission of autism, but not curing it. So Gilbert came up with this term, essence. How many of you have read Essence and know are familiar with Essence? Wow, you're a bunch of virgins. That's great. So I can introduce you to this concept. This is awesome. So genius guy, open-minded, thinking about what's going on, look around and says, you know, I've been a psychiatrist for a long time, and I didn't see the kind of problems with children generationally that I'm seeing now. Something's going on. And so he coined this term, essence, in child psychiatry. Early symptomatic syndromes eliciting neurodevelopmental clinical exams. So what is it that takes you as a parent, takes your kid to a developmental specialist to say, what's wrong with my child? The whole blanket of things, everything that's out there. So this is what he threw, and this is his Venn diagram of his intersecting sites. Attention deficit disorder, autism spectrum, conduct disorder, developmental coordination disorder, intellectual developmental disorders, language delay, nonverbal learning disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, specific language impairments, Tourette's syndrome, tic disorder, reactive attachment disorder, and language disorders. How many of you have a kid that falls on some one of those essence numbers there, okay? Do you think there's some overlap? Do you have like an OCD, bad-acting kid who's language delayed too? There's a lot of overlap between those, and he shows that in terms of how a lot of these are intersecting. Genetics and neurobiology of essence, so they talk about some vulnerability genes and some things that may be associated with it, and they come away with some pretty small numbers of genetic associations, but that's where the game is right now. Everybody wants to talk about genetics. So, how about that? That's just part of the biochemistry's chart of human beings. When we start to mess with that, what do you think we're going to get? Do you think we're smarter than Mother Nature, whoever she is? I want to meet her someday. But do you think we're smarter than her? Can we mess with that in a way that results in good things happening predictably? It's really tough to do that. We do it every day. What you eat messes with your biochemistry. What the bacteria and the yeast and the viruses that live within you do with what you eat and who you are alters your biochemistry. What you breathe, what you drink alters your biochemistry. The EMF that you're exposed to alters your biochemistry. It's a lot of pushbacks, a lot of checks and balances to try and keep you stabilized, but we're messing with it in a big way. There's growing acceptance for this whole concept, though. This is a textbook from Springer, which is a very reputable press, talking about microbial endocrinology, the microbiota, gut, brain axis in health and disease. So it's coming into maturity, and a lot of people are starting to wake up to this in science, and there's books written about this, and official textbooks about this. But how many of you go to your pediatrician or your neurologist and they immediately get this whole concept? It hasn't translated yet to the regular practice of medicine. But ask for my slides, and I'll get them to you. You can probably figure out a way to get a public Dropbox type of a thing where you can just download them if they don't have them through Autism One. Okay, so I'm going to be brave. If you need my slides, here's my personal email address. drbradstreet@gmail.com. Doesn't go through a secretary, it comes to me. I'll figure out a way to get you all my slides. You can then print up a slide or two, and don't go print up all the slides and give them to your doctor. Just one or two at a time. Say, hey, what do you think about this? And they say, wow, I didn't know there was a textbook about that. Yeah, maybe you should, wake up to this concept. Lots of complicated interactions between the gut and the brain. It's bidirectional. It's not just the gut influencing the brain. The brain influences the gut. How many of you, when you get anxious and nervous, feel it here? How many of you have anxious and nervous kids? Yeah. Where do you think they feel it? There as well. So, this slide for me is wonderful because it actually talks about defenses. These are very important, very small molecules that get into mucus and are there to defend you naturally. They're antimicrobial peptides. I think you could define autism as a deficiency of these antimicrobial peptides because they can't defend themselves. So they wind up getting lots of potential insulting bacteria that colonize them and overgrow because they can't protect their mucus barrier in the intestinal tract. So this is another one, neuroimmunological basis of behavior and mental disease and disorders. What? There's a whole book about that? You're not the only person in the world that thought about this? Wow. Where are the people that write these chapters, by the way? Why aren't they out there taking care of our kids? So, evidence of a common endocannabinoid-related pathomechanism in autism spectrum disorders. Wow, that is a mouthful. Okay? Endocannabinoid means smoking marijuana. No, it doesn't. Endocannabinoid was actually discovered, that whole regulatory pathway of receptors and the natural fatty acids that attach to it was discovered through marijuana research. That's why it got called cannabinoid. But it really has nothing to do with that. Lots of plant ligands and lots of fatty acids can attach to those receptors on cells, but this is one of the big regulators. And because of all the concern about marijuana, it has been a very neglected place in medicine for a long time, but now it's starting to come in its own. So it's developing a lot more credibility because we've learned that it's tied into almost all human disease. It's tied into cardiovascular disease, obesity, hypertension, mood disorders, and based on Max Planck and our research, we think it's tied into autism as well. This is only part of the picture. This is from the Max Planck Institute publication, where they think that the CB1, the cannabinoid 1 receptor in the brain, is being abnormally regulated in autism. That is kind of like the gas pedal and brake operation for the big pyramidal cells, which are the neurocircuit cells that are firing and creating the harmonics and the rhythms that we use for our thoughts and our memories. But it's more than that, because now we know that CB2 receptors, which is usually thought of as anti-inflammatory, regulate a whole lot of the brain, and I'll get into that some more tomorrow. So, keep calm and avoid bad microbes. Maybe it's not so much avoiding the bad ones, is not having the good ones. You really need to have the good ones to help defend you from the bad ones. So this is me back in my military career when I was a test pilot. So you thought autism was scary. We are entering the danger zone. And we're entering the danger zone because when you start to comment on big agra and big pharma and big government, Stephanie, you attract a lot of favorable attention, don't you? No, you really don't. But let's jump in. Okay, so this is a great textbook, The Empty Harvest. Has anybody read this book? It's awesome. It talks about how our agricultural systems, the way we're growing crops, is leaving us deficient and hollow. We don't have the nutrients that we used to. We used to let farmlands flood, and they would build up nutrients, and they would give us lots of great things, and trace minerals and vitamins and all kinds of good stuff. Now when you look at the vitamin content of the food that you're eating, do you see anything there? Almost all of it says does not contain a meaningful amount of anything in it, except carbohydrates. I love this one. Do you also eat these with the mask on? Do you eat those with the mask on? How are you protecting yourself from that stuff? So Doris Rapp, how many of you have heard Doris Rapp speak before? Good. I mean, this is, of my mentors, Doris is in the top 5 of all time. I love Doris Rapp. She is the queen of environmental disorders. She and I spoke collectively. I've worked with her association. I've helped to fund some of her research. I think she's brilliant, and she's out there, crying, wake up, because you're poisoning yourselves. And this is from her, and I just want to read it to you because this is a great compliment. Special for Dr. Jeff Bradstreet. Bless you for all you've done, are doing, and will do. So this kind of keeps me motivated because she says I've got all this stuff to still do. If we could clone you, I'm not in favor of cloning. If we could clone you with all of your expertise, integrity, and caring, there will be a much better place. With admiration, Doris Rapp. I don't get a lot of compliments. There are more websites out there that say bad things about me. I'm an exorcist. I'm a preacher, a bad preacher apparently. One of those, televangelists or something that, obviously should go to jail. There's so much negative garbage about me. The special master, despite the fact that the child that she was complaining about has said all kinds of bad things in vaccine court about me. You know why? Because the kid was completely cured and went on to become the valedictorian of his high school class. That's why you say bad things about people. So when you do get these kind of compliments, it's just really nice. But we are on target. So 5.2 billion pounds of pesticides worldwide. 40% of them are herbicides. What does 5.2 billion pounds of pesticides every year do to Mother Earth? Do you have any clue what's happening to us? Does that seem like a lot, 5.2 billion pounds? Wow. Okay, how many of you are Midwesterners and are in the red zone? Well, welcome to the party. That's the runoff, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So it really doesn't matter if you think you're organic, because the rain, the dust, the wind around you isn't organic. Environmental chemical exposures and autism spectrum disorders, a review of the epidemiological evidence. There's a whole bunch of evidence, by the way. It falls into immune, endocrine, epigenetic, microbiome, and mitochondrial disorders. They get it. This is a great review. You need this paper because it's talking about all the things. How did the microbiome get screwed up in the first place? It's not just being born C-section and getting antibiotics. It's an ongoing insult on the microbiome from what's happening in the ecosystem and the immune system. So Mother Nature, she's got a pretty tight squeeze from big chemical, big agri, and big pharma. We're not treating her very nicely anymore, and Mother Nature has a dark side. She does kind of get angry and come back and rebel. So this is from current problems in pediatric adolescent health care. I just turned them yellow and pulled them out of the paper. These are not my rewording of it. These are their words. Out of a chemical universe topping 80,000 agents, over 1,000 have laboratory evidence of neurotoxicity, but only a small fraction have been studied in humans during critical windows of development. Wow. Rice. I didn't know they used that much crap on rice. Wow. Poor guy's out there, he's got a respirator on, but do you think it goes through his skin? Yeah. I mean, I'm glad he's got a respirator on, but do you think it's going to affect his ability to have healthy children? Yeah, I do. So you thought you were safe because you didn't live on a farm, you weren't using chemicals in your house, you don't put Roundup on your weeds at your house. I hope you don't, right? You actually pull those suckers out of the ground the old-fashioned way. But this is a great cycle. It shows that regional transport of these chemicals is occurring. Dust, rain, water, runoff, all of that is exposing you no matter how organic you think you are. Now, being organic is great because it reduces some of that burden, but it doesn't keep you clean. Modern farmers, I covered up who this was actually talking about for my own safety. Our farm crops make their own neurotoxins, and that is absolutely the truth. We now have been able to incorporate genetically into crops the ability to make neurotoxins. They're aimed at the insect's neurological system, so the bugs will get crazy and fall off the leaf. But what do you think it does to you? Pesticides and autism, this is environmental health perspectives. This is from the CHARGE study, which is the University of California, Davis, who's doing some really great work and isn't afraid to tell the truth. And they're a big institution, and they're Californians, so they can talk about the environment and not get beat up and go to jail. So that's a good thing, okay? They're talking about all the bad stuff that's out there and how it is associated with autism and how they've been able to show its association through the CHARGE study. How close you live to a farm, how close you live to a highway, how close you live to an airport, all affects your risk of autism. Doesn't that look like fun? Don't you want that job? Do any of you have this job, by the way? Is anybody a farmer and doing this? I feel bad for you if that's the case. So that looks like, something from some toxic waste in a sci-fi movie or something, doesn't it? This is how they distribute it. Yeah. So a helicopter. Talk about aerosolizing and just getting it mixed out there indiscriminately. Bees and birds and anything out there is getting exposed to this. I know you want to shoot yourself now, right? It's a happy lecture, though, isn't it? I feel pretty good about it. Assessments of the level of damage to the genetic material of children exposed to pesticides in this little village. It's bad. They're getting exposed in a bad way. This is an amazing study. This actually shows that organochlorine pesticides concentrate in the fetus. They're higher in the umbilical cord and the fetus than they are in the mother. I didn't actually know that until I read this. It's being concentrated in the baby, in the womb. So Bacillus thuringiensis, the source of Bt toxin, is just a bug. It's natural. It's completely natural. In fact, the Bush administration made Bt, which is it's bacterial, it's natural, right? Mother Nature made it. Made that on the natural products list. You can be organic and have Bt and Bt toxin. So what about Bt toxin? It's called cry. Makes me want to cry. So cry toxin is this thing that's designed to basically puncture the intestinal tract lining, break down the intestinal barrier. So now you have defects within the intestinal tract lining. How many of you think you have a kid with leaky gut? Okay? You're getting exposed more likely to cry toxin than you realize. And one of the reasons you have leaky gut and resultant inflammatory bowel disease that maybe doesn't just need anti-inflammatories, but a change in the exposure to these environmental chemicals, because this is what happens. So these are microvilli, and the red stuff is cry toxin attached to the microvilli and breaking through, and you can see the red stuff is actually broken through the epithelial border, is inside the intestinal wall. That's the cry toxin. You want to have that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day? And you wonder why your kids have belly aches and why changing the probiotic that you're on or putting them on antibiotics doesn't make them necessarily feel better. Until you resolve this issue, you're not going to get that better. So this is a great cartoon to help you remember that. So, and here we have a bunch of food that made the crops made from crops that caused insect stomachs to explode, but it's safe for you. This is really the problem. So why did these people say that? Because quite literally, Congress in the last 20 years has passed legislation to allow industry to poison you with their permission. That's the reality. The only hope that you have is to stop buying that nonsense and try and vote for responsible people. But given the amount of money that's involved in political campaigns, I don't think we can compete easily on the money side. That's going to be really, really tough for us. The money that you can compete with is what comes out of your wallet and what you buy with it. And unfortunately, the quote-unquote organic crops are generally 3 to 5 times more expensive. What foods are most affected? Tomatoes, beef, potatoes. Well, let's see, in some families, that's number 1, 2, and 3 foods: ketchup, French fries, and hamburger patties. Oranges, lettuce, apples, peaches, pork, wheat, soybeans, beans, carrots, chicken, corn, and grapes. Probably just about everything that kids with autism consume on a regular basis, right? Antibiotic sales for meat and poultry hit a record high. So unless you're getting antibiotic-free food, you're giving your kid antibiotics every day. And what do you suppose the consequences is for the microbiome, that gut ecosystem? Not good. Voluntary GMO labeling, just trust us. So Congress a few years ago, and the president, our current president, signed it into law, allows industry to regulate whether or not they tell you the food is GMO or not. It's voluntary. They don't have to disclose it to you. All natural products. Oh my gosh. Some of you are actually under the unfortunate impression that the term natural actually means something. It should, right? Natural should mean something, right? It should have a definition. When in fact it's purely a marketing gimmick. And I believe me, this is just crap. And the red flag should go off when you see all natural, because they're hiding something from you. The Food and Drug Administration has no clear definition of natural when applied to food products. The main rule is it doesn't object to its use. And I'm not really picking on Minute Maid, which is owned by Coke, which is where I live, probably one of the major employers in my hometown of Atlanta. But this is their new, it looks really warm and fuzzy. So they're going after you parents, and they're trying to help you to feel good about what you're doing. You're giving them their all-natural products. So you should be happy. You're a good parent for doing that, right? So this is one of their new items that they're really pushing. It's called Cherry Limeade. So it has, the number 1 ingredient is water. The number 2 ingredient is high fructose corn syrup. On the entire, natural flavors, by the way, which is what? What is natural flavors? MSG or something like MSG, right? It's a code word for a flavor-enhancing agent that they add in. Natural flavors doesn't mean cherry extract. It doesn't mean blueberry extract. It's actually a code word for some form of flavor-enhancing agent. Cystoic acid, glutamate, something like that. All natural. And how many vitamins are there? None. It gives you 34 grams of carbohydrates, and that's it. Nothing else. No vitamins, no vitamin C, no vitamin A, nothing except 34 grams of carbohydrate. There's the all-natural high fructose corn syrup sitting on the railway side before it goes from Archer Daniels out to some beverage manufacturer. Harry Truman said, if you can't convince them, confuse them. So that's a good way to work. So Got Milk, this is a great ad, lots of great people. Superman, Taylor Swift, they're about the same person now. So maybe she's Superwoman. And then the Got Autism campaign that came out from milk. But one of the things that most people don't recognize about milk is how it's homogenized. So how do you get a fat to stay in solution? Fats don't want to be in water. You have to send it through this compressor at very high pressure and get the protein molecules to embed into fat globules. So now you have protein, which needs to be digested by enzymes that can break down amino acid bonds, embedded in a fat. Do you think you can digest that? You're going to absorb the fat globule with some residues of protein in it that's going to have alterations on your immune system, very clearly. So homogenization is of the devil, okay? It should never be allowed. It's a convenience factor, so you don't have to shake up the bottle. That's it. So is milk all bad? Well, the original protein in milk, the casein protein, was actually an A2, but a mutation took place that was A1, and farmers said, hey, these cows make more milk. This is before they studied genes. So if you're a dairy farmer and you have a cow that has a little bit of a variation and it makes more milk, what are you going to do? You're going to breed those cows. So now there is this goal to try and get A2 milk back into the market, but if you homogenize it, you're still not getting the benefits of that whole effect. So A2 is very digestible, A1 is not. If you're going to make your Bravo probiotic, try and get an A2 milk. And I'm really opposed to homogenization. Sulfation deficits in low-functioning kids with autism. This comes from Rosemary Waring, but Dick talks about this. Dick Deeth, Jill James talks about it. We all know about this. They don't detox well. So the environmental intoxicants that are coming in can't be sulfated, which is one of the natural ways that we detoxify ourselves. This is the pathway. I don't want to have to go through all of that in the limited time that I have. There's lots of other lectures about this, but if you're not familiar with the methylation, folic acid, cysteine, glutathione, methionine pathway, you need to, because it's an important part of what happens with your children. Lyme disease, lots of studies have attempted to verify other observations for Lyme disease. It remains controversial. This is a study that says there's no association with Lyme disease. I do have some kids with honest-to-goodness Lyme disease in my practice. I don't think it's a primary cause of autism. I'll probably get a lot of flack for that from people who are very much into that. But Lyme disease is prevalent, but it's always been prevalent. Maybe it's mutated some, maybe it's a different disease. Whether or not it's part of the autism epidemic or just a small niche of autism, I don't know. Iodine deficiency in Egyptian children. So iodine is something that's really easy to be deficient on because it's not obvious except through very subtle testing. So iodine needs to be supplemented in most children at about 100 to 200 micrograms per day minimum, and then upwards based on assessments of their thyroid levels. Autism and intellectual disabilities associated with mitochondrial disease. So a lot of you feel like you're there, but I'm telling you, mitochondrial dysfunction in autism, which Raziel and I talked about back in 2008, is real, but it's a consequence. It's not a primary cause. Something else is poisoning the mitochondrial energy systems, and you have to get that out of there. And just going on a mito cocktail isn't going to do it for most of these kids. Autism spectrum disorder and low vitamin D levels, a sibling cohort study. The American Academy of Pediatrics journal, Pediatrics, came out and finally said, hey, you know what? You give vitamin D to kids with autism, they get better. Thank God, finally. A little bit of ray of sunshine there. They don't go into a lot of detail on why, but it works for most kids. You can't be vitamin D deficient and function normally. Vitamin D status in autism spectrum disorders. This is another one showing that most of the kids, 80% of them were deficient and needed supplementation. I love this one. The scientist says, I want to know who put the lime in the coconut. Another unauthorized experiment of genetically modified food. Amen. Comparison of temporal trends in United States autism prevalence and suspected environmental factors. We have Stephanie Seneff here. I don't have to give this lecture, so I'll let her do that. Monsanto earnings fall. Yay, 34% as farmers reject GMO crops. Big news. Sperm chromatin alteration and DNA damage by all kinds of bad pesticides that you have in your garage, more than likely. You're afraid of those cockroaches and those bugs. Either you have someone come out to your home and treat it. Please think about all that stuff and how you use it. It does affect the human sperm and eggs. Mitochondrial dysfunction and organophosphorus compounds. So these are pesticides, again, interrupting the mitochondrial function. The autism bomb. Bayer was kind of intimidated by Monsanto's success with Roundup, glyphosate, so they came up with their own product called Liberty. Nice. Liberty is what's behind this study. Pre- and postnatal exposure to low doses of glufosinate, ammonium, induces autism-like phenotypes in mice. And I bet it's doing something similar to your kids. You know, rodents are pretty tough. You know, they probably are tougher than we are. Think about where they live and how they eat and how they survive in that environment. They're probably pretty tough. And it isn't just Monsanto, but eating organic is like giving Monsanto the finger. I left the name in there because it's such a cute cartoon. I had to leave it out there. Gene expression profiles in rat central nervous system. This is a military study induced by JP8 jet fuel vapor exposure. And combusting it doesn't make it go away. Even jet fuel, wow. So homeopathic therapy or elimination, who knows? So there's lectures that have been given in this conference about giving helminths, and there'll be lectures about getting rid of worms in this conference as well. So are you confused? The possible use of pig whipworm ova in autism spectrum disorders. This came from Nicola and Dario. So that he falls on the favor of giving bugs, giving worms. There's some good reasons immunologically to think about that. And within the biome. So this comes from William Parker at Duke, who said, the anthropology of the human species argues for helminths being part of mom and child's ecosystem, that we grew up on planet Earth with worms, our immune systems are designed to deal with worms and to function with worms, and maybe it's the lack of worms that are causing all these immunological disorders. And that's Duke. Danger zone. Dietrich's been trying to get me to listen to him for years about the effects of EMF and how we need to live in a Faraday cage, which is not a bad idea. It's just really hard to do. He talks about various distances to various electronic fields and what they might actually be harmful with. This recently came out, 2 emerging topics regarding long-range physical signaling within the nervous system, nanotubes and electromagnetic fields. These things are they create their own electrical field, and they're very sensitive to influences from other electrical fields. Human intracranial high frequency activated during memory cycles. This is 50 to 60 cycle per second gamma frequencies. This is Dick Deeth's specialty. Dick talks about gamma frequencies a lot. It's a critical part of memory. You bump up huge amounts of energy. To oscillate your brain at 50 cycles per second is using huge amounts of glucose and oxygen. It's very demanding to remember everything that I just told you, right? It's a lot of oxygen and glucose that's got to go in to do that. So we live in an electromagnetic spectrum of exposure. It goes through walls, it goes through buildings. You have Wi-Fi in your house more than likely. If you don't have Wi-Fi there, you're going to have it at the Starbucks, you're going to have it at work, you're going to have it somewhere. You're going to get exposed to a lot of this stuff. There's microphone towers all over your neighborhood. We all have, how many of you have a cell phone in your pocket or your purse? Yeah, we all have it, okay? It's all an emitter. Autism-relevant social abnormalities in mice exposed prenatally to extremely low-frequency electromagnetic fields. These are 2 articles, 1 and 2, from Martha Herbert talking about autism and EMF. You've got to be a fairly long distance away from really strong EMF, but even household appliances like hair dryers and blenders, if you're really close to that, if you let the kid kind of be there at the blender as the blender is going around, pretty high exposure to EMF. Now, that doesn't mean that causes autism, but it's at least concerning. Cell phone radiation, electromagnetic frequencies, so don't let your kid stick the cell phone in their ear. How many of you have a kid that likes to walk around with the iPhone stuck right here? Yeah, they do that, don't they? Not a good idea. You can see how much higher penetration into the brain of the influence of the EMF from the phone. Okay, The Last Mimsy. How many of you have seen The Last Mimsy? It's one of my favorite movies, okay? So a couple of you weirdos that have seen The Last Mimsy and like it like I do, okay? God bless you. But this is a kind of an interesting movie because it's about a hypothesis that is very stingy close to reality. The human species in the future is so genetically broken, they can't repair themselves anymore. They have to go back in time, and in this movie they go to 2004, I believe, which maybe isn't quite far enough back, to get some good DNA to then bring forward through the time portal in this little Mimsy doll back to help repair them. But how much more broken are you going to let your DNA and the next generation's DNA get before you start to do something about this? So I'm going to introduce the Bradstreet Essence Protocol. So you remember Essence? It's like that whole collection of things. I'm not going to give it to you today. I'm going to tease you today. And tomorrow's lecture is going to be what the protocol really is and what we're really doing to see kids restored on a day-to-day basis. So individually, we must evaluate our children. Not just me, but you have to individually think about your kid and the various risk factors. Look at immune, autoimmune, microbiome, toxicological risks, environmental risks, and assess the resultant brain physics. Now, we have a program where we can do QEEGs very simply on most kids with autism. It's not a complicated process. We can assess brain physics through our algorithms pretty quickly. And there's information about it at my booth, which is right outside. Apply known successful interventions, and there's a whole bunch, whether it's going organic, low-carb, mildly ketotic. How many of you do kind of like a low-carb sort of diet and find it helpful? Good for you. So change the diet. You got to get organic. Can you poison your kid and have me get him better with what I try and do? Probably not. And I'm not blaming you for poisoning. We're all being poisoned. EMF protection, remove heavy metals, reconstitute gut ecosystem. So Bravo has a booth out here. It's an excellent product, and most kids do really well with it. But there's other ferments. There's fecal bacterial therapy where we do transplants of other people's good stuff, you know, good, and you know what word is along the way. Improve oxygen with hyperbaric so you can get healing to the tissues. Treat inflammatory consequences. Low-level laser therapy will be part of tomorrow's talk. It's incredible what it does for both mitochondria and for inflammatory disorders. Stimulate healing with transcranial ultrasound. So Professor Ruggiero and I have been working on transcranial ultrasound both as a diagnostic and as a therapeutic tool. We're going to talk about that some more. I'm sure he'll talk about it in his lectures as well. Consider using laser to stimulate specific healing. We can diagnose defects in the cortex, and we think we can treat those very specifically. And you want to correct the brain physics using things like MRT. So how we do that, we'll start tomorrow at 8 o'clock, but I want to share something with you. Today is a very special day for me. It's Friday. It's the 22nd, right? And my son is graduating from high school today. So when he was, this is a little bit before 6, he went downhill from here. He actually had 2 MMR vaccines. The first one kind of set him off, and he was wild and crazy and hyperactive after that. The second one just wrecked his train. I mean, he went off the rails completely. Status epilepticus, nonstop diarrhea in his pants. He became a poop smear that didn't feel any pain, had no language, no eye contact, and no functional behavior whatsoever. If you want to know how to clean poop off of any surface, I pretty much can help you with that, including dogs, floors, walls, and furniture. Really bad scene, okay? Terrible. He had such sensory problems that we would lose him, and we'd have to look under beds, and this time we found him in the dryer, trying to isolate himself from all the sensory dysfunction that he was feeling. He's trying to treat himself. There he is. That's his graduation picture. I only have the proof. We finally found a school called Diamond School that would work with him at his pace. He's 21 years old. It took him till 21 to graduate from high school, but he completed all the curriculum. Considering when he was at 6, all he could do was play with feces, that's a pretty good rate of progress. And he's a darn handsome man. I can't imagine where he gets that from. But I would love to try and help you to do the same thing with your children. They may not graduate when they're 18, maybe it's 21, but I'd like them all to graduate into a useful productive life, and I hope to be able to help you with that. I'll see you tomorrow at 8 o'clock. God bless you all.
Hello, thanks for having me on your radio. Even though we're not from a famous rock and roll band, if we were, even though we sound a little like we are, we definitely wear a Conspiracy Realist t-shirt, because they're gear, aren't they? Oh yeah, they're really gear. I want to write a song about them. Conspiracy Realist t-shirts at truthertees.com. I gotta think of the middle 8. Shop.truthertees.com. What does that mean? It's the internet. What's that? I don't know. It's a net. It's between things. Shop.truthertees.com. What's that? It's where you get Conspiracy Realist t-shirts. Oh, gear.
Welcome back. Thanks for listening to Truth or Talk. You can visit our website at truthertalk.com. So, hey, V, what's up?
What's up? Yeah, I mean, that was a really interesting lecture. It was a little bit, honestly, I hate to admit, it was a little bit over my head. Some of the stuff I understood, but I mean, you've definitely been researching this longer than I have, and you're more familiar with the GcMAF factor. But nevertheless, it was very fascinating, and it really didn't paint a picture of a man to me that was trying to peddle like snake oil or useless treatments. It looked like he was really diligent and focused, and he had a purpose in what he was researching. Yeah. And like you said, if he was doing something illegal, why would he like have a big old lecture and have it air? Like thousands of people. Just common sense that that everyday people, these reporters who are supposed to be on it, just don't seem to have, or they just don't care. But I think it's really they just don't have it because they're like, oh, I'm a reporter. Yeah, I'm gonna write. I'm writing for the Washington Post. That means I'm smart. No, not really. No.
Well, they said in the article that they even commented on the fact that he had been threatened many times, but he didn't care. He was just diligently going on. They say that in the Washington Post article. Like Bradstreet knew that he, had threats. Well, what kind of threats? Threats of his life, threats of his career, threats of he had certain types of threats that they admitted, or that somebody that they had interviewed had stated, but they didn't. But then he just went ahead and went about his business and continued to work and didn't really talk about his threats or anything that went on. And another thing that I didn't even mention in my article, because my article I had worked on that for 2 weeks. It was a lot of research, and it just kept falling into my lap. I wasn't even necessarily trying to put all that together. It just kept coming at me. I kept seeing different things because I'd never heard of that macrophage therapy, the GcMFA, until I started doing this research, and after it just all seemed to kind of like fall together. And what was funny is all the critiques that I was getting from it were like, "Oh, you're a terrible mother. How could you be giving this treatment to your child? It's untested and all this and that." And I'm going, I never said I was doing that in the article or anywhere. I never even heard of this stuff until I started, until after Bradstreet had died. So I didn't even know about any of that. But, I've taken to stop defending myself to these people, and I go on the offensive instead and just say, well, since you're making an accusation, the onus of proof is on you to prove that I said that, and if you can show me where I've said that, otherwise what you're doing is slander, and I can actually sue you for that because you're accusing me of doing illegal activity in an open forum. I said that to one person, and she just deleted her comment. But
because you couldn't prove it.
No, you can't prove it. But it was just interesting how
no. I had things because you didn't say that she couldn't prove it. That's great. I'm going to use that.
Yeah, so you instead of going defensive, I've started to go offensive, because if people are making accusations or they're using ad hominem attacks and they're saying things about you, where's their evidence to show that? Give me the cite from my article where I make that comment. And then she's like, they're calling in on GoFundMe's. I go, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have a GoFundMe. And what does that have to do with me? She goes, oh, I'm sorry. I mean your donation page. And I'm like, no. I go, okay, well, where does it say that I'm using it for this treatment? I've never said that. I never even heard about it. I've never had my son on any kind of treatment like that whatsoever. I don't know, it doesn't say anything about that in the article. But instead of just being, like I said, I went on the offensive and said, okay, so you're saying that it's illegal and you're accusing me of using it. That's slander. because you're accusing me of using an illegal substance. So, therefore, and I don't even know if she's accurate. I don't even think that it is necessarily. I think it's not approved by the FDA. That doesn't necessarily make it illegal to distribute.
That means it works.
Yeah, that means vitamins are not approved by the FDA. All those vitamins that you go and you buy at your local health food store are not approved by the FDA. So a lot of things aren't approved by the FDA that are not illegal to distribute.
You know what? On that note, the FDA and vitamins, I just listened to a really, really interesting interview on Gary Knoll. It was actually censored. It was supposed to be on a radio station in California right before they were going to vote on SB 277, and it was censored. And if you listen to the interview, you can just see why, because it's phenomenal. And he was talking about how he did like a search for poison control centers and people, death and dying, and not one person has died from vitamins or supplements, but there were like all these deaths from, I forgot the exact number, but there are all these deaths from pharmaceutical drugs. And I'm just like, it just really, really, this is just satanic. Like, not even an understatement, the fact that they're denying people, they're trying to keep people, too. And it's like, okay, well, if you want to sell pharmaceutical drugs, fine, but don't lie and say, vitamins and supplements and things that actually help people are the ones that are killing people. Don't twist it. Don't get it twisted. That's what makes it, like, because like he said, and I believe in the person's right to choose if they want to do very harmful things to themselves, like take chemotherapy or radiation or, pharmaceutical drugs, that's fine, but at least give them, the informed consent and let them know about the other things that actually work as well.
If people had information, though, they would never consent to these things. That's the whole.
Yeah, I know.
They never get informed consent.
I know, but
that's the whole.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just like, I'm like, can't people see that? Can't people like make up their minds? But it's just also too that there are people that just have this like they have this addiction to authority, to people telling them like what they should do and what they should think. It even, I haven't fought as much as I used to in the past when I first got started with doing this, but I would argue with people all the time, and they'd be like, well, the science says, or the scientists say, and I'm like, well, can't you compare, contrast information from scientists and see what, make up your mind for yourself? And they were just like, well, that's what they're there for, to tell us. I'm like, wow, dude. Good luck with your life, good luck, and usually those people are the walking epitome of health, I've noticed.
Right.
Those people that are like a lot of people too, and it's so funny. I remember having not an argument. He was actually really nice. He was a bit cautious. He was very respectful, but we were talking in person. And about the medical industry and vaccines and stuff. And he was just like, it's cool. I have friends like you, that don't believe vaccines work and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, I bet you they're all healthy, aren't they? He's like, well, yeah. And he was really overweight, and he wasn't really healthy, and he didn't really look healthy. His skin didn't look healthy, It's funny though. I actually got him to think by saying that comment. He was like, he couldn't say anything. He was like, yeah, And by the end of the conversation, he actually agreed to look at some of the stuff, my links and stuff, that I get him. So that was actually pretty cool.
And it's funny you can actually get people to do that. I had that one time, this lady and I was commenting on our Facebook page, and we had posted something about the whole Angelina Jolie breast cancer thing. And I could see from her Facebook picture that she was in chemotherapy. And she had, like, the hair and all that stuff, and she was really sick looking. Mm-hmm. And so I was fragile, I was delicate in the way that I approached it. But basically, she was really confused with, at first she was like, oh, she's so brave. How can you guys criticize her? But by the end of it, she was agreeing with me. She was like, you're so right. I know food is the problem and is the cause of a lot of my ailments, but I just can't, seem to get it together. But you're right. If I eat well, I feel better, and I feel, even that it would help me treat my cancer. And so it's like, I think that people kind of know that because you feel different when you eat well. You feel different when you take care of yourself. And so it's just kind of but people are addicted to getting their information from scientists or doctors or whoever, or people that they call doctors.
They're lazy because she was like, she seemed as she was a little bit younger, but she was like, I'm getting into this argument with this person on GMOs. Mm-hmm. And do you have any references to show that GMOs are wrong? And I gave her the Eric Seralini. Do you know Eric Seralini? The scientist that's kind of blew the lid off of GMOs that made people really start questioning. I think I would say it's like the basis of why it's been banned in a lot of countries. Well, this scientist, he actually did an independent study of GMOs. He was doing, he did, I think 90 days was all that was required, and then after the 90 days, he did like he extended it for 2 years, and then this is when the rats started to get all these tumors. You've probably seen tumors, these grotesque tumors. So there's a whole website just dedicated to that study and independent science, and it's just a great resource for anybody that's looking for information on why GMOs are bad. And anyway, so I gave her that site, and then she gave it to her friend, and then she came back, and she was like, he says that site's been debunked. I was like, oh my God.
Right.
I was like, sweetie, you just have to realize that anything you send him, they're not going to look at it. They're not going to, because they're not going to admit that they're wrong. First of all,
right.
And you just have to know this stuff for yourself and be able to internalize it and be able to converse with him and other people. I mean, because that's really, I feel like, how you get through to people. And then there's some people that will silently watch and they'll go and they'll research links and stuff for themselves. You can still post links, but really, it's about internalizing the information. What do you What do you think about, well, I know what you think, but because we've talked about it, the neurotypical crowd and versus the pro-vaxxer crowd? Because I saw a couple of comments on your, at the on the bottom of the article that you wrote, and I had to stick up for you because you're my girl. And
I appreciate that. Yeah, that's nice.
But I mean, my friends, man, my friends, my family, I love you guys. I will kill for you. In a Facebook page,
for real. Yeah, for real. What do I think about you're talking about the neurodiversity crowd?
Yeah.
So neurodiversity. I read about this in the article that we're talking about that is on my page. Aiden's recovery.wordpress.com. So they the neurodiversity is a group of people who think that autism isn't a disorder, it's just a difference. It's just a different way of thinking. It's like, just perceiving the world from a different viewpoint. And that's and that's true, it is, but it's not, they're kind of on this wagon that it doesn't need to be cured or fixed or recovered in any way because it's basically just a difference and it's fine and you shouldn't even worry about it.
So, can I interject for a
Go ahead.
second? And also, from my experience and my observation, it also seems to be the parents who have children that are high-functioning autistic, not low-functioning.
I haven't seen, it's either adults who are, high functioning autistic on the Asperger's side of it, and they'll make comments too on YouTube, like, I don't need my Autism Cure. And it's like, well, that's real easy to say that you're making comments on YouTube, you know what I mean? And you're not one of these kids that's like nonverbal, that couldn't even type, that can't,
that beats his head up against the wall and claws off his face and spreads feces on the wall,
Exactly, you're not looking at that. Or even somewhere in the middle where it's like it's not maybe a kid who's engaging in some violent or aggressive behavior, but is like just really, really sick. And because what they're not taking consideration, as we were talking in the intro, is how I was saying that autism relates to every area of medicine because these kids are sick from every angle, including they have higher rates of cancer, they have lower lifespans, they have higher rates of heart disease, they have higher, they have migraine, headaches, they have they have encephalopathy. Of course they have migraine headaches. That means that your brain is swollen. It means that you have inflammation in your brain and your skull. Can you imagine what it would feel like? They have latent viruses all through their body. They have viruses that live, in their blood, on top of their brain, in their gut. So they're all over the place, and that's what Wakefield found out, was that that's his study back with the MMR study, was that these kids had huge inflammation in their gut, and they, in some cases, had actually measles rash in their stomach. So, I mean, just imagine for a second what that might feel like.
And then you tell them that, and then they'll be just like, well, I don't care because my autism makes me special because I can do math.
Right.
So, like, they're so fucking heartless. Well, you know, good for you and your fucking math superpowers. But, you know, the world really, there's more to that. There's more to the world than being able to do math. And I had this one person being like, well, my autism makes me special, and if it wasn't for people like me, I wouldn't be, you know, you wouldn't be able to solve math theories and scientific theories. I'm like, first of all, you can't solve math theories and scientific theories. You solve math problems and scientific problems. Hello? I thought you were, special and smart and shit. So then, you know, they were like, well... And I was just like, you know, I'm pretty sure that there are people that are geniuses, and that can do these things that don't have autism. So I don't really know why you think that makes you special.
Well, the thing is that the people like that are being used by companies like Microsoft and companies like Google and companies like I was mentioning at the beginning, these biotech firms and whatnot, that I like to call, that I wanted to call them out by name because they're evil corporations and they suck. But these people are taking those types of people, high functioning, and they're using them as corporate shows, and they're going to be using them for things like, and in Israel, they had a whole wing of recruitments for autistic children, or not autistic children, I'm sorry, autistic adults, young adults, like in their late teens and early 20s, who would be working for them to find, like spy, you know, to be working on computers to find, you know, the locations of enemies and things like that. Because why? Because they're not going to ask. They're just going to do the task, and they're just going to, you know, and okay, sure, some of them do have these levels of functioning in math and in science and things, and statistics and things on that level. But that's if they're talking about savant qualities, that's an extreme, like we see in the movie Rain Man, that's extremely rare. Okay, you're talking about less than 0.01%. And people will throw that in your face like it's just, well, that's autistic people or so blah, 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 blah. They might have some savant qualities, because if you're severely deficient in certain areas, like, for example, if you're blind, you might accelerate your hearing ability because you have to. You don't have a choice. You have to live on that. Yeah. So with people with autism, sometimes abstract thinking is so difficult for them that they might accelerate in math because it's not abstract, and so they get, you know, a heightened ability in that area. That doesn't make you a genius, doesn't make you a savant. It means that you've compensated for a deficit that you have. You've overcompensated on another side of it. So, but the whole idea that, you know, these kids who are beating themselves and go look at this video. It's called Up All Night with Self-Injurious Autism. This is an adult. He's about 18 in the video. I think he's in his 20s now. This was a couple years ago. And, you know, this is an adult who is clearly looks like he's from Bosnia or some kind of, you know, third world country, but he's not. He's right here in the United States, very sick, having seizures and banging his head as he's wearing a helmet. He has to wear a diaper because he defecates on himself when he's having these seizures and he can't control his bowels. And you look at these people and you tell them, yeah, this is just a different way of thinking. This is just neurodiversity. You know what I mean? That really pisses me off because this is a very painful situation. These are really, really, really sick children. And if you, like I said, I'm not trying to, you know, pimp my article here, but I'm just saying I go over it in this thing, because there's a citation I took from it, and I knew all of this about the medical comorbidities just from having dealt with it with my own son. He's very sick too. He has an autoimmune disorder, gut dysbiosis, and numerous allergies. I don't even want to get into all of it, but I just had experienced it. You know, I know what it's like to live with it and see it, and so I just knew, and from having, you know, been around my friends and my family and everybody, not my family, but friends with, they've become surrogate family with children with autism and so forth. I know that our kids are very, very sick and very, very ill. So, but I found this citation it's called the National Autism Association.org, and you can find type in medical comorbidities in ASD as of 2013. And they'll give you the listing of all the things that it carries along with it, as they've found through just statistics that they've taken off of, mainstream websites like the CDC's website and so on and so forth about the various problems that these kids have with their guts and their, elevated viral titers and so on and so forth. It's just, it's a never-ending list. That's why this is going to incorporate every area of medicine, both, medically, physiologically, psychology, psychiatric. I mean, just you name it, it's going to be affected by it. And people are breaking it in for reals. And you can take any kind of, just anything. Think of anything, yoga, soccer, whatever. It's gonna. Everything has been forever changed because now they're going to have to find a way to incorporate all these kids into it. And we're looking at right now the numbers are 1 in 68, which those are on the CDC website, so those are about 2 to 3 years old, and it's about like 1 in 20 in the military for kids that are born for families in the military. And so, I mean, I don't know. If you don't see the big pink elephant in the room that there's something is severely going on, then there's not much hope for you. And if you come into this whole neurodiversity thing and you're saying, well, that's just it's a beautiful mind. It's a way of thinking. It's just math. This isn't, I think that they have a hard time distinguishing between, when you're saying that, distinguishing between the person and the disease. It's like, you don't really, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, I've noticed that too because it's funny. It's kind of like, a double standard. They're like, I want my child with autism to be treated just like anybody else, but yet when they're an asshole, they want you to, they want to make excuses for it and be like, oh, well, he has autism. He has Asperger's. He's, no, he's an asshole. Because I've met, you can have Asperger's. And, where you're still self-centered and kind of, not really focusing on other things outside of you, but you can definitely learn to adapt to that and learn to relate to people. It may not be easy, but I've known people that have really, they've had to work really hard, but if you just have a parent that's just letting you treat people like shit and think it's cute because you have autism and or Asperger's or you're high functioning autistic, they're just training you to be an asshole. And you know what? That's going to catch up with them because in the end, no matter how much of a genius you are, people aren't going to relate to you. And people aren't going to stick around for you to explain that you have autism. And even if they do, they're not going to be around somebody that's insensitive and callous and is not respectful of them. So then they're not going to have friends. And then they're just going to keep telling themselves, oh, well, people don't like me because I have autism. No, they don't like you because you're a fucking asshole. Just like that, the line, that movie with the Social Network. Yeah. It was the best line, I've ever, it was great when she's at dinner with, what's his guy?
Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg. The guy who invented
Zuckerberg, the Zuckerberg character. And she's just like, I want you to know that you're really smart and inventive and, you're probably going to be very famous and I don't want you to, think that people aren't going to like you. And, she was like, I think that you're probably going to think that people aren't going to like you because you're a nerd or you're smart. But no, people are not going to like you because you're an asshole. And I really think about that with some of these people that let their children just walk all over people who eventually are going to be adults that walk all over people and say, oh, well, it's because they have autism. It's a different way of thinking and you're the one that has the problem because you're not being accepting of them. No, nobody wants to be treated like shit. Get it together. Nobody's not going to be your child's friend because your child's a fucking jerk. And of course there are people that are prejudiced against people that have special needs. I'm not denying that, but at the same time, people don't want to be walked all over, and it's not cool to make excuses for that. And you're saying you want your child treated like everybody else. If he didn't have autism and he was an asshole, people wouldn't want to be his friend. So there you go. He's being treated just like anybody else would.
Yeah, and the whole thing is, I believe is a manufactured psyop. I think this is trying to make it politically incorrect to say that you do not accept or you do not want your child to be autistic, because if you don't want them to be autistic, then therefore you're not loving your child enough, or you're not accepting of who they are. You know, I had this woman, she was like, why can't you just accept him? Why can't you just accept that there's something innate about him? I'm like, first of all, you're crazy, because I want you to point to me where in anywhere I've written anything that I said I didn't love and accept him as he is, or that I didn't, appreciate him and value him for the person that he is. In fact, I said the opposite, because I do judge people who don't find value in people that are disabled, and I do think that is morally repugnant. And if you if you're prejudiced against people with disabilities, then you suck. Then you're a horrible, horrible, horrible person, and I judge you morally. But if you but at the same time, I don't like that he's in a lot of pain, and I don't like that he has chronic pain. I think a lot of the frustration and a lot of the aggressive behavior that you see from autistic kids comes from an inability to communicate. Just think for a second what it would feel like if that were you. Just think about that. Think about if you had a toothache or a headache, or if you had measles in your intestines and your stomach was aflame, and you were in so much excruciating pain, and you can't tell anyone, and they're trying to make you go to school, or they're trying to make you work, or they're trying to send you to the store, and you've got the migraine headache, and there's fluorescent lights, and there's people clanking, of course you're going to start throwing a tantrum, and you're going to start banging your head and doing all this kinds of stuff, because you don't have the ability to talk. So all that's going to manifest physically. And so you want to say that they just love it? They're just loving it every minute.
Yeah.
They're just going all, about their lives like, yeah, I really love that I have to go to the store and everything is, and I throw myself on the ground and like, oh, isn't it beautiful? It's so accepting.
Oh, no, but
and
it's great. I'm going to just give him some Risperdal or some Ritalin to make him feel better. And that's
the big dirty secret that the neurodiversity crew don't tell you, is that most of them are drugging their kids, and they're saying, oh, well, it's so loving and we accept it. No, you don't. You sedate it. That's what you do. And there might be a few out there that are, that don't do that, and they just let their kids like run around in the backyard. Like, I don't know what they do, but I don't believe that it's as common as we're being made to believe. I think this is being manufactured by the media, and it's being manufactured by, paid trolls on the internet. A lot of them are, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because I just don't think that if you're a mother of an autistic child and you have experienced it, that you're going to go around attacking other mothers. It just doesn't seem logical. It doesn't seem like, even if they don't agree with you, like I wouldn't go and attack people in the neurodiversity crew. I would never go out of my way to find them and then track them down and tell them that they're wrong. I just, it wouldn't even cross my mind to do stuff like
you
that.
have better stuff to do, like trying to find a cure for your son.
Right, and that's
like,
hello. If you're an autism mom, you're busy. Okay, your life is tough, so you're not going around trolling for just to talk to mess with people and to try and say that vaccines don't cause autism. By the way, on my site I also have a link to a scrib that you can find. It's 100 published studies to prove the vaccine and autism link. So you can take that and put that in your arsenal and have that ready whenever somebody tries to tell you that vaccines don't cause autism. The onus of proof is on them to prove that, because they're trying to prove a negative, which they can't do. So unless they can tell you what causes it, they can't tell you what doesn't cause it. They can't say that it's not a disease unless they can say what it is. So when people tell you, well, no, it's not a disease, it's not caused by autism, they're trying to prove a negative in both those instances. So they can't tell you what it isn't. They can only tell you what it is. So
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Oh, what is autism? What would you say autism is? Because I noticed in the lecture too, he has all these lists of things about what people think it is and what's causing it. What do you think it is?
I think that it's a neurological manifestation of an autoimmune disorder, meaning an autoimmune disorder is when the body's cells attack themselves. So what happens is when you get the vaccines, you have these multiple viral injections and toxins and heavy metals and things. So the body doesn't know how to respond to so many things at once. And so it starts to send out signals to send antibodies to all these different things, but it doesn't know. It gets like overloaded, and then ends up attacking on itself. And so you have a situation where the body's attacking on itself. So then there's the cascade of problems, severe inflammation in the gut, leaky gut, which then, of course, causes the allergies and so on and so forth, all the things associated with autoimmune disease. And the neurological factor, the inability to, or the difficulty communicating, that has to do with a brain, part of the brain that doesn't use motor planning skills, where the motor planning is skewed. So your motor planning is your brain telling your mouth, say, hey, I want to say this word, put this out. And so your brain tells your mouth that, and your tongue and everything goes into action, and you say a word. Well, when you don't have that ability in your brain, you develop things like apraxia, which is a speech disorder, or you develop dyspraxia, which is where your body doesn't move and function the way that you want it to, or you develop dyslexia, where your eyes do weird things when you're looking at, a book and you're trying to read and the words jump off the page. So all that's caused by a dysfunction in praxis, which is your motor planning function of the brain, and that can be caused by any number of gastrointestinal problems, because the GI is highly connected to the brain, and neurotransmitters in the gut can send negative signals to the brain and so forth, and also encephalopathy, as we mentioned before. Very, very commonly known vaccine reaction. All of our kids have it with autism.
Encephalopathy, that's holes in the brain, right?
It can result in holes in the brain. We can't see holes in the brain from an MRI, so it doesn't technically mean that. It just means it's swollen.
Okay.
It's big. It's a very, very, very inflamed. So
encephalopathy and encephalitis are the same things?
Yes.
Okay.
And so, encephalopathy, I guess that's like encephalitis means, itis means inflammation. Encephalopathy is the pathology. It's just, just a different way of wording it. But yeah, it means that. Encephalopathy means the swelling of the brain. Now, the holes in the brain, we have seen those in people with autism that post-mortem in autopsies. But on basic ultrasounds and MRIs, they're usually undetectable. So we don't know how many people with autism have those holes in the brain, but we suspect that there's probably more, because we are able to see them post-mortem in a few patients. So what's causing that? The encephalopathy, there's a lot of different theories on it, what the things in the vaccines are doing it, and I'll hopefully get more into that in the future. But we wanted to bring up this stuff about Bradstreet because, I don't know about you guys out there, and you guys can certainly chime in, and I want to know how you feel about it. But I think that what was done here was probably a murder. And this guy probably had some information that would have been useful to the public that is now being concealed, because all of his records and everything in his office was cleared out, and all of his computers and everything is gone now. So you guys be the judge on that, how you feel about that, and what you think, and what we should do to try to preserve whatever it was he was working on, so that maybe it would be useful for people to know about. So
for sure,
for sure. So, did you have anything else? Because I think we're just about time here.
That's great, and I'll pimp your article for you because it's a really good article. So go. I'm also going to. By the time the show is up, it should be on the website, because we have a space on our website too with essays. Well, we've both written essays, but what is it's called? Is it safe to find an autism cure?
How dangerous is it to find an autism cure?
How dangerous it is to find an autism cure. So yeah, we'll have that up, or you can go to April's website at tell them.
aidensrecovery.wordpress.com, and it's spelled AYDANS recovery.wordpress.com. So yeah, and I'll put it in the write-up too, and you guys can check it out and reference it. And I think everybody's kind of come on this whole GcMAF thing. But I wrote this before that was all released, that was my theory, but I honestly don't know if that's what what he was killed over, but I do feel that there was something that he knew, or that he was doing, that he was practicing, that was dangerous to the establishment, for reals. So
for really reals,
I'll leave it at that.
Play.
For really reals,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
for play. And I'm not crazy.